the 2nd of the 2nd, 2020, and the upload that I'm sharing now is with regard to issues regarding human rights. In all my previous uploads, I've discussed all the matters that I've had to overcome with regard to violations and wrongdoings. And with this upload, it's basically with, regard to intellectual property, creative property, and whatnot that I've had the experience of being intruded upon with the other matter of the inviolability of my dwellings. So, with regard to this matter, there's the issue of violations of privacy and the accessing of information and people violating information and information especially that doesn't pertain to them and that doesn't have or hasn't been authorized and hasn't been openly shared or discussed with individuals that are perpetrating violations. So there's ethical and unethical practices, and as adults we all know procedures for being ethical and professional and respectful. And with these thoughts and principles in mind, I'm concerned about how nowadays, by means of unethical practices, people have accessed information without proper procedures and without consultation. As well as this, there's the matter that I'm concerned about, which pertains to research and development and efforts of progress that haven't been conducted by ethical means. So, as anyone would agree with me about this, guinea pigs is, research is a thing of the past, and there are procedures, and when procedures aren't adhered to, there are negative outcomes. With regard to any kind of research and development, there needs to be consultation, there needs to be open discussion and consultation, and there needs to be sharing of information, and most importantly, communication. And communication is in many ways verbal and non-verbal, but when it comes to such issues as research and development, verbal communication and consultation are a prerequisite. So when these matters occur, when there's violation of privacy and when there's information accessed without consultation, and when there is research and development conducted without consultation, that's in breach, blatant breach of EU laws, and it's also in breach of human rights. And since I experienced these human rights violations in 2017, matters pertaining to all citizens' human rights has been a concern, and this especially so since I had to overcome matters from the past over a decade ago that didn't just involve assault, but also theft of my creative work. This has occurred recently as well, as I've mentioned, with the inviolability of my dwellings, and that has led to exploitation of work and research and studies that I commenced in 2006. So these are the issues from an objective perspective of circumstances caused for people that aren't being respected when there's research of any sort or information shared without respect for the dignity of the person being subjected to such a violation. It's a difficult topic to discuss, it's a sensitive issue, and there's a lot more involved than what I'm sharing in this upload. But when these things are happening in any society, it gives cause for concern for future incidents, especially when it comes to young people. As a teacher, as an educator, we all know the requirement for protecting ourselves, protecting children in our care, and protecting their information, and also just respecting their experience and respecting their knowledge of circumstances and society that we live in. And my concern today, with human rights violations that I'm experiencing as an educator and as a professional, would be with regard to how young people are learning from experiences of injustice, discrimination, or inequality. When young people are exhibiting um, respect and honesty, then that's a good sign of the times. But when adults, professional adults, are failing to respect the rights of other people and other citizens and individuals in society, it makes me wonder what kind of a future generation are they going to be responsible for. And also, as well as that, there's the issue of being upfront, and there's also the issue of transparency and being able to speak up without fear for having to say what you have to say. And when young people are noticing adult behaviour that displays dishonesty and avoidance tactics, it is not setting a good example, and that isn't positive for future generations and for future developments. Um, so basically, in this short little upload, um, my concerns are around practices, professional practices in particular, with regard to how people conduct their research, their developments in society, um, especially when not adhering to proper codes of behaviour, professional standards, and ethics. Um, Over 10 years ago, as I've mentioned in previous uploads, there was an incident of not only what I've already mentioned, but also what I've mentioned in previous uploads, but also the incident of my work being violated. And that led to a negative experience and had also negative outcomes. And similar circumstances are presently occurring, and it surprises me that as adults, as grown-ups, as professionals, that such a lack of maturity would be apparent in an experience like this. Um, Anyone's work that is conducted should be respected, and people taking a claim for another person's abilities or purpose or expertise um, is it's highly disrespectful for any individual's efforts in any field of study or work or whatnot. Um, my experiences that I'm sharing about um, all pertain to these kind of matters, and it would seem that in 2020, over 10 years on from an horrendous experience after 2005, that people have not learned from the past. And it would also seem that there's also a huge lack of respect being displayed by adults that are supposed to be professional, that are supposed to be, you know, conducting their affairs in or by ethical means, and yet are yet again um, violating codes of practice, behaviour, standards, and ethics. So these kind of situations that are caused in society, that involve very serious wrongdoings, violations, etc., have negative outcomes. And I'm so surprised that people haven't learned from the past. I'm surprised that such a circumstance is what is happening nowadays. And this is from an objective perspective, but the history is repeating itself, and the lessons of the past haven't been learned. So I'm just wondering how this is in any way an evolved society, um, not just on a micro level, on a macro level, worldwide, how people have not learned from the past. Progress isn't easy, evolution isn't easy, and when on a minor scale, these kind of situations of people making the same mistakes over and over, as Einstein says, is insanity, or trying to do the same thing over and over again and getting the same results and getting nowhere, it's insanity. And in a small community, such as the same, it can occur on a large scale or a small scale, but in a community where there has already been negative outcomes due to overriding another person's position or undermining a person's position or trying to disrespect a person and defame a person, um, it's baffling what kind of regard people have for human rights and civil liberties. So these kind of things that happen from a sociological perspective, from a cultural perspective, from an ethical perspective, from a moral perspective, and from a historical perspective, give rise to big questions about how progressed and evolved we all are. And when, as I've said, um, from a subjective perspective, when people aren't able to confront their wrongdoings and when they're unable to amend their faults, um, it makes me wonder how mature and how respectful are those kind of individuals. So research and development involves codes of practice, and those being researched or developed or whatnot are being used for those kind of means and methods need to be consulted and informed about what they are being subjected to. And scrutiny and criticism and judgmental kind of commentary isn't helpful, especially when it's, you know, not when it's not constructive criticism. Um, research and development is positive, progressive, worthwhile activity and productive when it adheres to proper practices. But when research and development is conducted unethically, that's a very serious violation. And there are other violations pertaining to that also that are more serious, especially when it involves health and especially when it involves a person's right to travel, earn, have a family, etc., etc. So, as regards information, the same issue is relevant, the same factors are relevant. Basically, if there's no respect for privacy and a person's personal information, then there isn't respect for anything. So these are only little topics worth mentioning in this entire issue of human rights on this channel of uploads that I'm sharing. Um, I speak from experience and I speak from the knowledge of what I've endured and I speak from what I've seen around me and from what I've encountered. And human rights are valuable to any society. They uphold the respect of a society and a community and the culture of that community and society. And when people are unable to respect, then I think society fails. So there isn't any positive outcomes from undermining a person's role or position in a situation, be it big or small, and there's no gains for exploiting another person's abilities or work or whatnot. So communication might be difficult for some people, but it's vital for all of us to understand that honesty, respect, and dignity and integrity are kind of invaluable, and without those, the pillars of society crumble. So that's my upload for tonight, and it's pretty vague, but very relevant, and hopefully food for thought.